Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Chakras and Cuss Words podcast. And today I have my friend Rose, and we are going over the birth chart and the numerology of the notorious B.I.G., Biggie Smalls, and Tupac Shakur, also known as Machiavelli. So this is a in-depth understanding of both the astrology, their alignment of how these two basically started their cosmic connection through areas of interaction, success. They were even friends, and then they turned enemies. So we will get into the whole story of these two famous rap legends in a bit, but I'm going to go ahead and have Rose introduce herself and let you guys know a little bit about her. Go ahead, Rose.
Hi everyone, I'm Cora Del Sol on TikTok, and I'm also on Etsy as Cora Del Sol by Rose, and I offer tarot and numerology readings. And I discovered numerology because I was going through a dark phase in my life and I wanted to find my purpose. And by finding numerology and breaking down my chart, I was able to see where my setbacks were, my pros and my cons. And I started doing this as a hobby. And later on, people started approaching me to do this. And that's why I started my business.
Awesome.
So
That's great. I love that you have a business in numerology. I feel like so many people are starting to kind of like get more acquainted with numerology. I feel like, are you seeing like an uprise of numerology on like TikTok and some of the social media platforms versus where it was probably like 3 years ago?
yes, and I was so obsessed with it. I didn't think that anyone would be interested in it, but
Mhm.
people would start asking me questions at parties or gatherings, and they would just start surrounding me and asking me, "Do my numbers?" and "How about me?" and
Yeah,
and it
right.
got overwhelming to the point where I was like, I need to start charging for this because everyone's
Definitely.
thinking I'm doing this for free, and it's not free. My time
Right.
is
It
not
takes
free.
a
Yeah.
definitely takes a lot of work, right?
Yeah, the only thing I'm starting to see that I kind of dislike on social media in regards to numerology is that sometimes I find that there's some numerologists out there that will put or place some numbers on pedestals and
Mhm.
downgrade some numbers and speak about certain numbers as being like this, I would say, the creme de la creme of numbers, or
Right.
like better off than others. And I don't see it that way.
Right.
I feel like that's an egotistical view of numerology.
Mhm.
Just because someone doesn't have a master number in
Right.
numerology doesn't mean that they're better than you
Right.
or anyone else. It just means that they have something karmic to learn from that can
Mhm.
help those that are around them. But once they utilize their master number to do something maybe for themselves in a more egotistical approach, it can be a setback. So there's pros and cons to every set of numbers, even a master number.
Right, right, definitely. Okay, so let's get into the numerology and the astrology of Biggie and Tupac. So for many of us, we have to start with who were these amazing artists. So who was the notorious Big? He was born in New York City. Got different locations. I got New York and also Brooklyn, and I believe the Bronx. It changed a few times, but I went ahead and went with Brooklyn. It doesn't really change too much of his birth chart. We know that he was born in Brooklyn, New York, United States, Sunday, May 21st, 1972 at 2:19 a.m. with the original name of Christopher George Latour Wallace. And his day that he actually passed away was on March 9th, 1997, known by his stage name, the notorious Big, and sold. I'm flipping off my husband because he's being annoying. And sold them over 17 million records in the United States. I hope he gets called into work. Okay, so the birth chart of Biggie, he is a son at 0 degrees in Gemini, which is a very crucial degrees, and he has an ascendant in what is to believe Pisces. He is also a Virgo moon, and he is let's see, we have that he has dominant planets in his Virgo, Gemini, Cancer, Moon, Neptune, and Mercury. Most of his planets alignments happen in the 7th, 3rd, and 4th house. He's mostly a mixture of earth, water, and he is a mutable, I guess you could say, strong element zodiac.
Mhm.
What's also interesting is when we start to talk about Biggie, is that he not only was he, I would think he was kind of very in overall had that lucky aspect about him in some ways, because he did have his Jupiter in Capricorn. And for most people, I feel like everybody sees Capricorn as that dominant kind of like successful sign, especially when it comes to like being like somebody who's centered around legacy. And also they see that area of Jupiter as that area of expansion. And I think that kind of showed in his overall mission to start, right? He also
Mhm.
has his Mercury in Taurus. His Venus is in Cancer, aligned with his Mars. I thought that was kind of an interesting dynamic. I know there was some what would you say, like he definitely had some controversy with his relationships, right, between Little Kim, Faith Evans. There was
Yeah.
definitely like that alignment of relationships that really kind of played out in the media, where versus with Tupac, you barely heard of any of Tupac's relationships. Like I honestly, like when people were like, oh, Tupac was like linked to Jada Pickett Smith, I was like, he was. I never fucking hear about it.
Yeah, and you know what? I could kind of sort of see it
Yeah,
because hypothetically, we don't really have the birth time of Tupac, but
right.
hypothetically, it could have been in Virgo, they said. From me searching and deep
Mm-hmm,
diving into the web, they said he was supposedly born at 12:58 p.m.
mm-hmm.
and that would place him into a Virgo ascendant. So that would make sense why he would have hit it off with Jada Pinkett since she is a Virgo.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. That and I didn't look up any of Biggie's ex relationships, birth charts like Faith Evans or Little Kim. But
Mhm.
I thought it was interesting that he did have a lot of similar energies, especially like we'll see like that Saturn energy. Saturn is in Gemini, where both of them were Geminis. And for Biggie, that was occurring in his 3rd house, which in all honesty, when I think of the 3rd house, I often think of like that area of the um I would say like the communication, and also the area of like technology, and how he was able to transition, but it was also like who he was in some sense. But also with the 3rd house, I feel like there's a correlation, like he had a lot of knowledge, and he also had a lot of energy that was centered around continuing to grow and continuing to move forward. But the fact that he had that Saturn, I feel like also maybe constricted him in some ways. Like I feel like Biggie expressed himself very creative, but I do think that there was like a little bit of a tamer manner in him versus Tupac. Like
Oh
when you,
yeah,
yeah,
the
definitely.
Taurus placements.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what was Biggie's numerology for? What was his?
So his life path is 9, but before I added down to the 9, I got the number 45.
Mm,
And that's actually in my chart and some of the charts I have overseen in some clients.
mm-hmm,
And in the tree of life, it's Mars and Scorpio.
mm,
And it could mean that there was possibly early deaths in his family, maybe even some sort of abuse, physical abuse, sorry. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Or possibly even early exposure to something sexual that he should have not been exposed to. So there's a lot of regret and
Mm-hmm.
reflection into the past. So it could be someone that can hold grudges, and it's very challenging for them to forgive others, and it's something I've struggled with myself, so I definitely could relate to that. And then if you add the 45 down, you get 9,
Mm-hmm.
which reflects his Virgo moon. So I feel that he had a lot of forgiving to do emotionally, and
Mm-hmm.
if not, it manifested in his health, because Virgo is the house of health. So maybe he was an emotional eater,
Yeah.
or
Right.
which I'm guessing he's not here to speak for
Right. Defend.
himself.
Right.
Yeah. And then we get down to his attitude number. So his
Mm-hmm.
attitude number is 21 added down to 5, which is May. We don't count the year, and we get 26, which is an 8 number. So
Right.
8 is about karma. So it's kind of like what goes around comes around, because if you flip 8, you get the infinity number. And it's also strength and Leo in the tree of life and in the tarot. So I get that he had power struggles,
Right.
is what I'm
Right.
getting, especially in his earlier days in his youth, because of the way his life path was broken down.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
his birthday number is a 3. So it's just the day alone. We don't include the month, we don't include the year. And that's number 21 at first, which is the world card, I believe, in the tarot. And it's Saturn energy, and it's fixed energy. It represents all the fixed signs. And then we break that down to 3. And we get the Empress, which is Taurus or Libra.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I see, whenever you pull the world card in someone's numerology chart, it's someone that is meant to travel and loves to travel. It's an international person. So
Mm-hmm.
he was meant to be internationally known, being
No.
on a 21st day. Yeah. And then as I look over into his soul number, he had the soul number of 1. It added down to 55, which was the Ace of Swords, which is Gemini, Libra, Aquarius. And it's just so, I don't believe in coincidences,
Right.
because if you have the Ace of Sword, that means that you were meant to be a communicator. You
Mm.
were supposed to be an inspirational speaker. So he definitely followed through with his destiny. And then
Right.
when I look at his personality number for, let's say, his stage names, because those become your personality numbers, a lot of people in Hollywood create stage names. And whether it's deliberate or intentional or just destiny, these stage names have meanings. So Biggie Smalls has the
Uh-huh.
master number 44 as a stage name. And then
Um,
what I remember, I broke down the Notorious B.I.G.
uh-huh.
And actually, sorry, it's the Notorious B.I.G. that has the master number 44, and Biggie Smalls is the number 6. So the number 6 is about communication, and it's about peace, love, and harmony, but it's also that like suave number that can convince anyone to
Mm-hmm.
do whatever it is they like. They can use it for good or they can use it for bad when you have the number 6 in your numerology. And then his life destiny number was added down to a 1, which is the magician in the tarot. And it's the Wheel of Fortune prior to me adding it down.
Mm-hmm.
So what I got from that is that he was able to manifest his desires.
Mm-hmm.
He was a true magician. So whatever he thought about, he was able to bring it to the world through manifestation. Whether he um, study the occult or not, I believe that he had a very strong mind, and he was able to manifest through his writing skills, especially with that moon in Virgo and that Gemini sun and those other Gemini placements. That's so mercurial, and that's very, I would say he was meant to be a writer. He was destined to be a writer.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about his alignments with his also with the Mars and the Venus in Cancer is the Venus is in 4 degrees as well. And it's noted that he had a very like strong connection with his mom. Like I remember his mom was, you know, a single mom, I believe, both Biggie's mom and also Tupac's mom. And it seemed like there was like this dynamic with the mother that seemed very like consistent and loyal, but Biggie also I remember I watched a documentary, and when I remember like she like had to kick him out the house or something because she found out like he was selling drugs or something. So it was like a totally like different dynamic versus like Tupac's, because Tupac's the mom was, I believe, like addicted to crack. So instead, this mom's like kicking her son out because she's like, I don't want you to, you know, take the wrong road and all this stuff, versus where Tupac's mom had her own problems. But what's interesting about this is that it was in the fourth house, and that represents the energy of the home, and then it also energy of the like feminine, where it is more centered around that Venus aspect. And then it's also in Cancer, which is kind of known as like the mother moon, right? That feminine energy. So I definitely think that that played a big part in his relationships, and also in his relationships with women. And maybe that's why he was so known for like some of his relationships with women, right? Like it's because he had that Cancer element where he was very sensitive, I think. Like I would definitely feel like he had that more sensitive streak versus some of the other guys as rappers. Like you can kind of see it in him. So I think that was very interesting. But I also want to talk about also in the third house, he was his sun, Gemini, and also Saturn. And to me, I really think that even though he was tapped into his power, he always felt like some type of restriction with it. I don't know if that shows in his numerology or if that shows in energies. I know you said that it was like he was probably going back and forward, kind of like he was having some interactions where maybe it wasn't so, I don't know, easy for him, you know, especially in childhood. But to me, it seems like he always had this conscious conflict of the two, of expressing himself, but also having like this constricting matter or sense about him. One of the things that also stands out when we look at their charts, and when I look at Biggie's chart, and one of the things that I wanted to kind of point out now is that he has his Uranus in Libra, and that is actually in his seventh house. And that is the house of like partnerships. And that also seems like an area where he would have problems in his marriage, especially with that aspect, because that area of the Uranus is almost known as like the troublemaker, like that
Yeah.
area of like getting in trouble, being a little bit more rebellious, kind of having your own way of your own like unique perspective, that if you see things certain ways, you don't really care what other people see. It's kind of like that Aquarian style where it's like, oh, okay, but you know, I care about people, but this is kind of like how I want it done. And I think that maybe that is one of the reasons why he had so much conflict in his relationships, because it seems like a lot of stuff that happened to him within his life turns back to the relationships.
Oh yeah, especially with little Kim, and she was a Cancer. So
Oh, wow. I didn't know she was a
yeah.
Cancer.
So she definitely spoke to his Venus in Cancer. That's why he was
Right,
so attracted to her and so on and
right.
off with her. And they had such a like tumultuous friendship, right?
Yeah.
And I know you said there was like some sort of connection with his sun in like there was something conjoined with his sun in Gemini and Saturn in
Mhm.
Gemini.
Mhm.
And the I remember I broke down his numerology and I saw
Uh-huh.
that. I'm like, wow, he's his own worst enemy in a sense. Because
Mm.
I broke down his soul, like his personality number from his birth name,
Mhm.
and I added it all down and I got the number 62. And the number 62, if you look up the image of the Eight of Swords in the tarot,
Ooh, that's
that is his personality number from his birth name. So in the tree of life, the 62 position is the Eight of Swords, which is Jupiter in Gemini.
mhm.
So it's kind of like it's self-sabotage or someone that has analysis paralysis. So him just sitting there with his thoughts and maybe having inaction in not taking action versus just like sitting there all the time and overthinking something with his process was something that was detrimental to him,
Mm.
is what I'm seeing from
Mhm.
his numerology in association to his astrology.
Mm. What do you think about the ascendant of Pisces? Because Pisces is such like a spiritual type energy. Do you think that had a lot to like with also like do you feel like he was a little bit more I don't know, like I feel like even though he was like Pisces ascendant, I feel like he wasn't as tapped into kind of like his spiritual sense versus like Tupac.
Yeah, I felt like he was more realistic, like he was more tapped into
More
his
like
Virgo moon.
right.
But I do feel that Pisces ascendant affected his Virgo moon, where
Mm-hmm.
maybe he overthought everything or he
Right.
overanalyzed everything. And
Right.
maybe, for example, maybe he probably thought he had enemies when he didn't,
Mm-hmm.
or it's someone who's very anxious and holds everything in versus verbalizing it. Maybe in the heat of the moment, he might verbalize something, but there's some deep seated emotions that he probably didn't verbalize with that Pisces ascendant. Because I feel Pisces represents the deepest
Mm-hmm.
parts of the ocean, and
Mm-hmm.
Cancer represents that above surface level of the seas and the
Mm-hmm.
ocean. And Scorpio represents those surface layers that you discover as you dive deeper into the waters, but Pisces
Mm-hmm.
represents the ultimate depth that we don't see
Mm-hmm.
and what is unseen.
And I was kind of surprised that his Pisces, like usually I feel like sometimes when people have like, like a rising sign or their ascendant, you kind of see it more in the chart. Like, but with him, it was like just his ascendant and that was it. Like we didn't see any more areas with the Pisces. That was it. He didn't have any planets in Pisces. It was just basically that's that. But his Neptune, which is the modern ruler of Pisces, is actually in
Sagittarius.
Sagittarius, which I
Uh-huh.
thought was also interesting as well. But I was kind of surprised that that was it of the Pisces. Like, but then he doesn't feel like, in all honesty, and when you like, I mean, I don't know if it's just because I mean, we're both like West Coast girls, so I don't know if it was like maybe I didn't listen to all his songs, but I just felt like his songs weren't as deep as like Tupac's. I don't know.
Yeah, his were more like uh he liked to rap more about what would please his senses,
Right.
because I feel like he tapped into that Mercury in Taurus, because Taurus is about the
Mm-hmm.
senses, about touch and feel, and it's like a
Mm-hmm.
very sexual energy. It's about your pleasures. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel that's the reason why, with a moon in Virgo, even though Virgo is all about health and everyday routines, I believe his mind really took over. So maybe when it came to his senses, that's why he would overindulge,
Mm-hmm.
I would say. And it's so interesting because I often meet Mercury and Taurus individuals, and they typically have that very deep voice.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt it suited that genre, that like kick back, like that Taurus
Have
energy that's
right.
very like into pleasing those senses, sexual
Uh-huh.
energy as well, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah, definitely some areas where um it seemed like it was more like he was more like of a idealist, more like kind of rooted like the here and now versus where like Tupac was way more dreamy. And also I feel like I mean I don't have Tupac's chart right in front of me right now, but I also feel like Tupac had more of that like duality aspect
Oh,
versus Biggie, where, Biggie just like that's Biggie. Like, I didn't feel like there was that area where he could play like both characters that like Tupac was able to play,
yeah.
or tapped into. It was like just who he was. And then when we think about the Neptune in Sagittarius,
Mhm.
I feel like it's funny that the Neptune was in Sagittarius because I do feel like he had that and I'm not saying like Tupac wasn't like scholarly or he wasn't poetic, but I do feel that Tupac was more of like a poet versus a rapper, but like Biggie was more like smarter in some ways and like a little bit more wiser when it came to like the means of like travel. Even though he was like conquering his dreams, you could tell that he did like definitely almost like weigh out his options. And even though, because when they were having that beef, it was kind of like he was kind of hesitant to going to California. Like that was like a big thing for him. It was like something that he talked about. And it seems like Tupac was just kind of like, I'll just go. Like I felt like Biggie was like weighing it out more versus like Tupac's just like, I'm just going, wherever. Like, I'm going to start a fight. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. No real like recollection of what possibly could happen. And I don't know if it was because he was more centered around that area of the Neptune, of maybe the Sagittarius kind of, even though he was centered around expanding his dreams and that dreamlike nature, but it also maybe leveled him out in a way where it let him see what was right in front of him. Like, he acknowledged the beef like thoroughly. I feel like he knew, I feel like he knew something was up.
Oh yeah, he even communicated to his mother, I feel like people are watching me, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I honestly even feel maybe even P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, whatever you want to call him, I felt like even he kept an eye on him. As
Mm-hmm.
his manager and associate, I felt like maybe he was afraid of losing him. So
Mm-hmm.
he probably kept a watchful eye on him, maybe even Pac at some point, because P. Diddy has aspects in his chart that are like really controlling and very much into investigating deep
Mm-hmm.
into the surface, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I even felt like he was possessive over Biggie,
Right.
unbeknownst to Biggie. You know, I felt like he
Right.
probably kept tabs on him without him even knowing.
Mm-hmm. And what was interesting too is like when you look at the Pluto and Virgo with the moon,
Mhm.
that, I mean, Pluto to me always kind of represents that area of closing a chapter and closing like an area around transformation, birth, and death. I mean, and the Pluto connected to the moon Virgo, and also connected to the Cancer element again. with it being aligned with the Pluto and Virgo. And then we see that energy of the feminine, especially around the mother. And I feel like his main focus was tied back into that area of definitely of the fourth house energy, where he still has his Venus in Cancer with his Mars. So then it kind of tied it back into that energy of like the war and having that huge transition of what started off as a like rap battle or, areas of two people who used to be friends and then turning into this alignment of where they don't like each other anymore. It started like almost like in his roots and like who he is in that home aspect of him. And then the Chiron in Aries too, I feel like is very, I mean, when I think about Aries, I feel like Aries, just that element of Aries is very spontaneous and very much like aligned with a clusterfuck sometimes.
Yeah.
It's very spontaneous, and the Chiron, even though I don't have it on this chart, but it actually was in his first house. So that's like his house of who he is. And the Chiron's known as the wounded healer.
Mhm.
And what's also interesting too, that I think that stands out in his chart is the North Node is tied into the Capricorn and that energy of the Capricorn again with success of him living in his current state, and that area of like reflection of success of the current and then the expansion. I feel like when I look at his chart, like his chart doesn't look to me it doesn't feel like it's heavy on one extreme like karmic energy like um versus like somebody who maybe is, except for that Cancer element with the Venus and the Mars, like to me, that one really stands out. And the Sun in Gemini along with the Saturn. But overall, the chart doesn't feel like so chaotic versus like somebody else's where that they're destined for a certain path. I almost feel like there was a lot of external elements that kind of put him in areas that he may have been knowing could happen and then maybe just somehow making wrong decisions or getting caught up in more shit continued that area of where ultimately he lost his life.
Yeah. And I believe his Chiron was even though it's in Aries, it's in the third house. And I believe that's, groups as
Uh-huh.
well. People you associate with and you grew up around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and from what I was looking at, the moon and Pluto, the 29 degrees in Pluto, Virgo,
Mm-hmm.
to me, 29 degrees, when I think about it visually in the tree of life, I add it down and I get 11, I get justice, I get the card of Libra.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of issues with the law, police, and possibly even a setup through associates, because if we add 11 down, you get two.
Mm-hmm.
So those are associations.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure if his Chiron is in the third house, but I'm thinking when I was looking at it, it was in the third house.
Oh, see, I have it in the first,
Okay.
but
Oh, so it's in the first house.
mm-hmm,
Sorry.
with
So
Aries.
Aries. Okay. So it
And
is.
then the Pluto in the seventh with Virgo.
Okay, that's where I was
Mhm.
getting confused. Okay. So yeah, with the Pluto and Virgo, it's still, I believe it's
It's
29
still
degrees.
29 degrees. Yes. I
Yeah,
still have 29 degrees too.
yeah. So
It's
with
like
the
right on the, it's like right, getting ready to transition over. It's
uh-huh.
like right. And I believe it was in retrograde too.
Wow, that's crazy. And it's just so crazy because the day that he passed away,
Mm-hmm.
on that specific date, which was March 9th, 1997, if you add all the numbers down, you
Mm-hmm.
get 38, which
Oh,
in the sequence of the tree of life,
uh-huh.
it's the Queen of Cups, Cancer,
Oh,
Scorpio, Pisces.
mm,
And who's always around him that's a Scorpio? And P. Diddy,
yeah,
right? And then
I
you
know.
add 38 down, you get 11. And
Right.
it's just so coincidental. I don't know if it's by pure coincidence or if it was intentional, but the day that Tupac passed away, it adds down September 13, 1996, adds down to 47, which is also in the tree of life, the third decan of Scorpio, which is Venus in
Mm,
Scorpio. But it also adds down 4 and 7, adds down to 11 as well. So both
wow.
were assassinated on a master number 11 date. And if you
Wow.
look at P. Diddy's chart, his Mars in Capricorn, which is very controlling and
Mm-hmm.
compulsive and very like, I would say, is very possessive and dark,
Mm-hmm.
that it's at a 29th degree, 11. It adds down to 11,
Mm-hmm.
which is just so interesting because I feel whether it was intentional or destiny,
Mm-hmm.
even the numerology is somehow links these three people together,
Mm-hmm.
especially on the day that Puffy and Tupac were assassinated.
Yeah. Yeah, I too definitely think there may have been something, definitely with Biggie. I haven't looked at uh Puffy's chart, but it is noted that also he had a sun trine Pluto. His Gemini sun was in trine of Pluto, which is, I mean, it's not really a big, like, it's not like an opposition or something where you would feel that it was like a direct um alignment in that way, but it does show that energy of like who he is, and Pluto is um resembles that Scorpio because it is seen as the ruler of Scorpio. And it does explore the areas of regeneration and energy of rebirth, especially in transformation of how like society sees him with that
Definitely.
trine.
Hmm. I think he worries a lot about his image and what he presents to
Mm-hmm.
others, especially
Mm-hmm.
with that Mars in Capricorn for his like everyday actions and his
Mm-hmm.
Venus in Libra, and that those Scorpio aspects, which are, I think he has a stellium in Scorpio, right? Neptune in Scorpio for P. Diddy, and Mercury and Sun in Scorpio.
Mm. Yeah, he's a huge, I think he is a huge, I haven't looked at his chart in a long time. But also with Biggie, he has his Mars is in strong opposition of his Jupiter. So with the Mars basically pushing back on the area of success, I'm kind of not surprised that there was a explosive, like volatile movement when it came to like his career. And
Possibly even towards women, right? Because
right,
Mars is ruled by the
right.
home and mother.
Yeah.
And he had like so many upheavals with a handful of women, right?
Mm-hmm. With a handful of
Especially
women.
Faith Evans and
Do you know what she was? Do you know her zodiac? Was she
oh, I didn't look her
the
up.
sun sign? No, right? I know. I feel like even though he was married to Faith Evans, a lot of people feel like there was definitely definite definitely a strong alignment with him and Kim. I mean, we know like Kim had an abortion. She talks about it on her record. Notorious Notorious Kim, or so I definitely feel like they had a very strong relationship as well. And then there was also that conflict with Faith and Tupac. So
Oh, yes.
let's get into friends before enemies. So Biggie and Tupac were actually friends before enemies. The two met at the set of The Poetic Justice while Tupac was filming. Biggie looked up to him. He like kind of considered Tupac his friend during the early days of these two. Tupac was already a star, and Biggie was an up and coming star, but he wasn't really a star. Tupac was, in movies. He was in Poetic Justice. He was in oh gosh, I can't even remember. Juice. He was in Juice. And I think he was in like a movie where he played a cop. I can't remember all the movies, but he was definitely acting and performing and doing music. So it's even believed that at times that they were such close friends that Biggie was staying at Tupac's Los Angeles home for many times, like many days. And Biggie even performed on stage with Tupac multiple times. At one point, which I thought was kind of interesting, and it brings up that Sean Puffy Combs, is Biggie even asked Tupac to take over as his manager. However, Tupac declined and apparently told Biggie that staying with Puff would be better for his career in the long run. And then there was the shooting, right? And the shooting that first took place was actually with Tupac, and that was in front of the recording studios. And it happened um, shortly after that happened is when the beef all started. And Tupac and Biggie never really reconciled their differences. They continue to have this energy of Biggie representing East Coast rapper signed to Bad Boy, Puff Daddy, Sean Combs. And then the beef between the two really started when that one song was released by Biggie called Who Shot You? And Tupac felt like that song was directed to him because that was the time that he was shot in, I believe a total of like 5 times or 9 times. I don't know. He was shot a lot. It was 5,
Yeah.
right?
He even started wearing a vest after that.
Right.
Mhm.
And he was shot 5 times. And then he recovered, and he didn't have any major things wrong with him, but it definitely made him feel that Biggie and Puffy had something to do with it because they saw him that night of the shooting and he felt like it was a direct hit. And then after the song came out, Who Shot You? Because nobody was ever, I believe nobody was ever arrested for that. I'm not 100% sure. And then Tupac was really a representation of West Coast, as a West Coast rapper who was signed to Death Row, Suge Knight. And he too continued to have songs that I felt like antagonized Biggie. So I feel like Biggie had the first song, Who Shot You? And then he said that that song was actually recorded before Tupac got shot. But Tupac just kind of rolled with the whole scenario that somehow Biggie and Puffy were involved with his shooting. And he continued the beef, I would say, a lot more than Biggie did. He released Hit 'em Up, which was basically a huge, 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 like everybody loved it. And he antagonized him and he said, that's why I slept with your wife. And he even like portrayed, because I believe she recorded a song with him, or a backup track or something that never actually, I don't think it even got released, but then um, Tupac did take a picture with her and continue to flaunt the idea that he slept with Faith Evans. Of course, at the time, Faith Evans denied all that. So who was Tupac? So Tupac Amar Shakur, also known as Tupac and Machiavelli, was an American rapper and actor. He is a Gemini, and that Gemini duality, I feel like, played a huge role in who he was with his art and his life. He was seen as sensitive, creative, but he was also seen as a thug. And the last album that Tupac had, that was released, was basically a tribute to the thug life. He faced many legal problems, and he even did jail time. His fourth and final album, All Eyes on Me, really showed, he got that thug life tattoo and he was living in that element. On September 7th, 1996, the 25-year-old was gunned down in Las Vegas and died 6 days later. His murder has still basically been unsolved. Suge Knight was with Tupac at the shooting. Tupac Amar Shakur was born Lassane Parish Crooks on June 16th, 1971 in New York City. His mother, Afina Shakur, who was a political activist and Black Panther Party member, was arrested in 1969 for allegedly coordinating attacks on the police stations and offices of the city of New York. She became pregnant with Tupac while out on bail and was acquitted in 1971 after defending herself in court. However, she did serve jail time while she was pregnant. So I feel like there was some areas of definitely womb and trauma. So this was quoted: when Lassane was 1 year old, Afina changed his name to Tupac Amar after the Peruvian revolutionary who was killed by the Spanish. She said of the reason why she changed his name is because I wanted him to have a name of revolutionary, indigenous people in the world, and I wanted him to know he was part of a world of culture and not just from a neighborhood. That was reported from biography.com. Tupac moved to the Marin City in California, and it was in Marin City that Afina began her battle with addiction with crack. And actually, Tupac was a drug dealer, and he sold crack, and he actually sold it in the same neighborhood that his mom was a buyer. So this led to the downfall of their relationship for quite some years. And it really led like a falling out between the mother and the son. Tupac, I believe, had a sister as well. I think Biggie had a sister too. And at the age of 17, in spring of 1989, he began going to poetry circles in Oakland, California, and he became a roadie and also a backup dancer for the hip hop group called Digital Underground, which was a Bay Area rap group. And they did songs like the Humpty Dance. Humpty Hump was like the lead singer, and Same Old Song. So they were very well known in the Bay Area. And that was kind of the start of Tupac's career. The birth chart of Tupac: he was born Wednesday, June 16th, 1971. The time is unknown. And a lot of people have asked me, what did I think his rising sign was? I feel like there's some Scorpio aspects, possibly, maybe even a Pisces as well. I really like the Pisces. If him and both Biggie were to ascendant Pisces, that would be a trip. But but it's all pretty, under wraps. His dominants are Gemini, Aries, Aquarius, Mercury, Moon, and Saturn. He is a combination of air, fire, and mostly a mutable element. His Chinese astrology is, his metal is, his, and also pig. Numerology birth path is 4. And then what was Biggie's birth path? I forget.
I believe his was
9. He was a 9, I think.
yes, he
Yeah,
was a 9.
he
He
was a
was
9.
it added down to 45 and it went down to
Right.
9. So he was an old soul
He was an
in a
old soul.
sense.
He was definitely an old soul.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's look at Tupac's chart and get into some of his numerology. First of all, I will say that when we look at Tupac's chart, we can automatically see that he is way more Gemini than what Biggie was.
Oh
He
yeah.
has, yeah, he is a sun in Gemini. He has his Venus in Gemini, and he has his Mercury in Gemini as well. Also, with Tupac, he really, to me, shows that duality of the wounded, I would say almost like wounded poet, that somebody that you like feel sorry for, like having like this hard battle. And then at times you remember like, wait, he's not that nice of a guy. Like, should I be feeling sorry for him? You know what I mean? Like, am I
That
supposed?
Aries moon made him temperamental, you know?
Yes. Yes. And then again, we look at that Aries moon as being his emotional side, right? The Aries moon, I mean, the moon is always known as that area around the feminine and also the area around emotional, like how we feel. And Aries to me is always going to be a very spontaneous zodiac, and it's also going to be like a very fiery zodiac. It's going to be that zodiac that like is the one who like just punches somebody in the face.
Either that or they have like a quick wit about them
Right,
where
right.
right away they know exactly what to say at exactly the right time. And I feel like when there's an injustice, they say it quick. I
Mm-hmm.
have a I have a sibling with moon in Aries. I believe my father's moon in Aries, and they don't waste a second to say something.
Right, right. Yeah. And since we don't really know his house placements, we're not gonna really go on it. What ascendant do you think he possibly could have been?
No, I feel with all that mutable energy in his chart, I feel like maybe he did have a Virgo ascendant. I was doing
Mm,
some research and
mm-hmm,
um, I looked up even someone that did psychic work and channeled, and they said they saw that he was born at 12:58 p.m. and
mm,
it would have given him a Virgo ascendant. And I could see that because he was always wearing the crosses. He always was like
mm-hmm,
preaching, I would say, for the
mm-hmm.
good of others. And I think that's very Virgo,
Right.
for someone to enlighten you through knowledge
Yeah.
and through what it is that they have studied throughout their life. Like they
Mm-hmm.
want to enlighten everyone around them. And to
Right.
me, that is such Virgo energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I do feel like he could definitely have like some earth element tied into the big three. Um, but I also feel like his big three like feels very like spontaneous as well. I do like the idea that possibly he could have like some watermelon, some water in there. Some like some Scorpio or maybe some Pisces, but a lot of me feels like he's so high energy. Maybe there's like still more air in him. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he had maybe like
Mhm.
a Gemini rising or something like super, I don't know, just out there because I feel like with him, or maybe even like um a Libra rising, because he has that area, like he was always very flamboyant. So I feel like it's like either another air element or maybe another fire element in there
Mhm.
somewhere because of that, just that really high energy about him. And I also think that it's, like he always had that confidence, like that look at me, like, he accused Biggie of like stealing his style. Like, everybody stole his style. Like, so it was definitely like, I feel like that confidence was like so like masculine and very like ego driven. So I could even
Oh
see
yeah.
like a Leo too.
Yeah, I could definitely see the Leo.
Uh-huh.
Out of all the fire signs, I
Yeah.
definitely would have favored either Leo or Sagittarius placement because he was so philosophical.
Right. Right. But yeah, I could definitely see a Virgo ascendant as well, especially with the Pluto.
It probably would have grounded him. And I was looking at his mother's chart before I logged on out of curiosity, and his
Uh-huh.
mother was a stellium in Capricorn. She had three placements in Capricorn, but she had a Virgo moon.
Oh, wow.
So I'm feeling there's something about Virgo that
Mhm,
possibly influenced him to
mhm,
seek spirituality because
mhm,
I feel like Virgo loves to dabble into the
mhm,
metaphysical realm.
mhm. Yeah, I do too. Like Virgo to me is like one of the most like witchiest signs. Like when I look at people's charts and they're like, and I see a lot of Virgo in them, I'm like, you are probably a witch. Like you are my people.
I'm a
Come
stellium
here.
Virgo.
Right? Yeah.
I'm a stellium Virgo and I get accused of it often. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like their nature.
Uh-huh.
They're just very witchy. Like it's like, yes. And what's interesting about the moon in Aries, like I feel like his music, like his emotional like baggage was like all out there for everybody to see. Like he's like here. And then he has the Chiron in Aries too.
Mhm.
And it's like he just put it out there, like all the vision, all the philosophy, all the aspects of it like making him feel good probably at the moment. And that's probably like I feel like his like style of rap was kind of like how Eminem's is. Like Eminem was basically like crying on his fucking records. Like, you know what I mean? Like like letting us all see like everything that was fucked up in his life, and just kind of like owning it. And then with him too, which is also interesting, is you know he has a different North Node than Biggie. Even though they were born the same year, his North Node is in Aquarius, where Biggie's was in Capricorn. And for the Aquarius North Node, I feel like that's where that creative center of like the here and now with the collective like really spoke volumes like to a lot of people. And I also feel like he was like a huge trendsetter, even though like he was in gangster rap, but he was like different than the other ones. Like he was like different than like the ones before him, like Ice Cube and WA. Like he had his own individual style, and then like the bandana that he wore, like he really made a trademark of like who he was, right? Like there's not many people, like if you did a silhouette of just like what he was wearing and didn't even show him, but like just showed the bald head, the muscles, and maybe like baggy jeans, everybody would be like, that's Tupac, versus like, I mean, I don't know if you could do that with like Dr. Dre or somebody else, but he really created his own personal style where to me it's stuck to like the collective. And when I think of Aquarius, I always think of like the collective, the people in the community, the people like the hip hop fans. They like if they like you ask anybody, they know who Tupac is, just about. So, um, I feel like that really made him who he was on a area that was focused on like association, goals with people seeing him for who he was.
Definitely, especially with that Jupiter in Scorpio. I
Mhm.
feel like there was expansion through the occult, something philosophical,
Mhm.
speaking about anything that was metaphysical. And that very much complements an Aquarius North Node, because Aquarius is all about what's taboo that people don't want to speak about. And he was very much about that, especially
Yeah.
with his pursuits of philosophy, and how he, even one of his stage names was Machiavelli,
Mhm.
which is really interesting because when he was locked up, he read up a lot of, was it Machiavelli philosophy or whichever. And
Mhm.
he even, I think he just spelled it differently. And it was just surprising when I looked at Machiavelli's astrology, because I was just curious. And both Tupac and Machiavelli have similar charts,
Oh,
only
really?
Machiavelli is a Taurus, but they had similar placements, even though they're 100 years apart,
Hmm.
hundreds. And Tupac is Gemini. So he's just the next sun sign over.
Mm. That's
Very, I feel like his purpose was
uh
meant to enlighten people around him.
right.
And I feel like that's how his Jupiter complemented his North Node in Aquarius. Like that was his mission.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think that he with the Jupiter, that area of Scorpio, it's almost like that again, that duality, right? Like Scorpio is all about like secrets and certain things being hidden, but then also that Jupiter is like trying to let it all out. But then you also always felt like you never really knew him, even though he was letting it all out. It was like, okay, you let all this stuff out, but we still don't even really like know you. Like, it was like, did he do all those like horrible things that he was like convicted for? Or was that really not him? Was that somebody else who did it? And then he always had that approach to him where like he was seemed like somebody who cared about like the inner city and the people who are growing up with a lot of like a lot of obstacles and a lot of areas of overcoming certain situations. And he would talk about it like in songs like Brenda Has a Baby and Shorty Wants to Be a Thug. But then he was still representing that all that negative aspect about that life. And he was still continuing to make songs that were basically about everything that in some ways he was going against. So it was like a conflict, I feel like the Jupiter with the Scorpio as well. Like a part of him was very deeply invested in areas of wanting that change, but then for some ever whatever reason, it was just like a block.
Yeah, I felt like he struggled with that because his mother raised him to be some sort of revolutionist. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I feel with that Saturn in Taurus, he strived for consistency and like a materialistic life. Yet he fought, he struggled with wanting to have and own that nice, cushy material life. And at the same
Mhm.
time, enlightening others. Like um, where I work, I constantly see a myriad of people, and I one time saw this guy and he was wearing a Crips and Bloods, I believe, like picnic. And I was like, where'd you get that shirt? That's
Mhm.
such an odd shirt. And he goes, you never knew about this picnic that took place. And, Tupac like brought these gangs that opposed each other together. And
Uh-huh.
he was able to like squash the beef, give them a bit of a peace treaty, and he
Uh-huh.
entertained them. And I was like, I never knew about that. And I went home and I Googled it right away. And the guy still had the shirt with holes and faded and
Oh,
everything,
wow.
you know? And he said he was a part of that picnic.
Mhm. Mhm. That's cool.
Mm.
And then we have the Mars in Aquarius. Okay. Yeah. So then again, I feel like that area of the Mars is probably what got him to that area of, starting his career and starting that area where a lot of people saw him for who he was on the personal side. And then I feel like the collective also enjoyed that angry side of him as well. Like they enjoyed the anger and they enjoyed, the poetic sense of him. But in all honesty, they liked the anger. They liked that energy that felt very action, very spontaneous, and also very orientated to um of areas of living without boundaries and living in that free state of just doing what you want, like that thug life nature. Like I feel like that's what the collective liked of him the most. But deep down, I think he was a little bit more of a spiritualist or maybe even like a philosopher. And I think that him knowing that that's what they liked is also what he continued to push out. Because in like some ways, I feel like if he knew he was going to continue to sell a whole bunch of records, being more of that philosopher or that sociologist or that person who was like an activist, would he have picked up that streak more or would he have, continued to stay in that angry nature?
I feel like he would have evolved into more of a philosophical approach
Mm-hmm.
and looking out for humanity as a whole. I feel like he wanted to influence people in a positive scale. Not just with his, I know he had like a very strong masculine energy. Like I believe there's even a quote where he said, I'm not saying I'm gonna change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will
Mm-hmm.
change the world. So I felt like that was the reason why
Mm-hmm.
one of his stage names was Machiavelli or his writer names, or
Mm-hmm.
I felt like he wanted to influence people through his writing.
Yeah.
And he did have an ego in a sense, but I also felt like he feared that side of him that could potentially change and alter history
Mm-hmm.
or alter the path of people that he influenced.
Right. Right. And then we have the Saturn in Taurus, which, Saturn in Taurus is kind of like I don't know, to me it feels very like constricted and frustrated.
Yeah.
Like it just feels like that aspect where um the possessions, the materials, the wealth is all very constricted, right? Like it doesn't feel like very free flowing versus like maybe if he had like, I mean, I guess anytime Saturn is with a zodiac, it's never going to feel like 100% free flowing. But I feel like when it comes to areas of possessions and wealth, and especially somebody who is in the limelight, who is basically a performer, an actor, an artist, and then he's not able to basically express, maybe he's not able to or basically express who he is in the ways of fortune because the fortune might get taken away. Or maybe it was like he knew that there was going to be a lot of struggle with areas of the fortune or areas of the material. Like, I don't know if like but it feels like everything kind of got rooted back to that area of who he was and how it was so constricted and restricted. I do feel like that is just such a frustrating energy. Like, I just feel like that must have been really, a tough one. Like, I mean, Saturn just is a tough
Placement. Yeah.
placement. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But Saturn with Taurus just feels like, oh,
Yeah, it's not the funnest energy. Like even when I pull it in my cards, it's like, oh, this is so tedious. Like
yeah.
it's Seven of Pentacles in the tarot deck or in the Tree of Life. And
Uh-huh.
metaphorically, it represents you planting a seed and you're just standing around waiting for that seed to grow. But as you're standing around and waiting, you have to water it, you have to nurture it or
Mm-hmm.
speak to your plants, you know.
Right, right.
And it just takes a lot of work. And
Right.
especially with Taurus, because it's an energy that's very consistent and at the same
Mm-hmm.
time very methodical, it can sometimes be detrimental to growth because it's so methodical and it's cautious and it likes to do everything by planning stages in a sense. And when I was looking at his chart, or his numerology, I mean, um, I see that his soul number is master number 33. It's also six. And six is the brighter side of
Mm-hmm.
Gemini. I mean, um, it's the lovers in the tarot. It represents the lighter side of peace, harmony, and communication. And also, Taurus represents your throat chakra, the way you speak. So I feel like there's something in his chart with the master number 33. I typically see that maybe there was a setback in communication growing up, and he had to learn how to communicate, and he
Mm-hmm.
researched how to communicate better in public. And I feel like that's how he discovered his love for poetry and rap. So
Mm-hmm.
he was destined with his soul number to find a gift through writing and through speaking and teaching others how to speak without fear with that
Yeah,
master number.
definitely. And I think too also that Uranus in Libra is back. That energy of partnerships.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah,
They both had it, right?
yeah, 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 the both of them. And then some of the aspects that um just like Biggie, he has the sun square. Well, Biggie had a sun trine Pluto, where with Tupac, he has a sun square Pluto. And he also has the area of Jupiter in opposition of Saturn as a strong aspect, and Saturn in opposition of Neptune as well.
Oh, yeah.
And, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I see that now. The
Yeah.
opposition.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And it's funny because you don't see too many aspects with the Chiron versus how you did with Biggie, but most of his energy, he has a moon trine Jupiter, moon trine Neptune, and then the the Saturn opposition of Neptune as well, which I feel like um the trines are his benefit, but then the opposition of Saturn and also the square sun square Pluto is definitely where he was seen as very self-centered and egocentric, but also he did want to transform society in some ways, but he was not able to. The Saturn in opposition with Neptune to me makes me feel like he had a lot of achievements, especially with performing and being a performer and living in that energy, but then also that's a lot of the downfall of what was more to come. So let's get into the death of Tupac. So the
Yeah,
death
this
of,
is,
huh?
oh yeah, this is what interested me the most. Yeah.
So the death of Tupac.
Mhm.
Tupac died on September 13th, 1996, from
Mhm.
wounds suffered in a drive-by shooting. Age 25, he was hit by 4 bullets on September 7th at approximately 11:15 p.m. As he rode in the Las Vegas or near the Las Vegas Strip in a car that was driven by Marion Suge Knight, Death Row Records, who he was slightly wounded as well. So he actually died 6 days later. The surgeons removed Shakur's right lung, and then he was basically pronounced dead at 4:03 p.m. on Friday. And there is his chart. Okay. So when we look at the aspects that are happening, we have the Pluto conjunction with Neptune, the Pluto opposition with Saturn, again in Taurus, the Pluto conjunction with Jupiter, Pluto trine Moon, Neptune trine Pluto, Saturn conjunction with the Moon, and then also the Mercury conjunction with Pluto, Moon conjunction in Pluto. One of the things when I think of Tupac and everything that happened to him, I feel like he knew it was coming. I mean, when we look back at the photo, it's like he looked very helpless, like I just feel like in some ways there was that sense that for whatever reason he appeared very like, I mean, it just, I mean, even though it is just him driving by and there's no real like, but most photos of him, he has some kind of like life that feels a little bit more
Mhm.
energetic. But when you look at that photo, it just feels very docile.
Yeah. And what's so interesting is he's born on a 16th day. And within that era, we had celebrities born on a 16th day, which is Mars energy in the
Mm-hmm.
tree of life. It's Scorpio and Aries Mars energy. And Aaliyah, who was born on a 16th, died
Oh,
tragically.
really?
Selena was born on a 16th as well. April
Oh,
16th.
wow.
She died tragically. And obviously Tupac was born on a 16th day. There's something about that Mars energy that attracts like death and violence and something very
Mm-hmm.
spontaneous and upheaval.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was looking at his chart and his numerology, the Mars in Chiron opposes his Uranus in Libra at 90 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I feel is really fascinating is that the numbers kind of repeat themselves in
Mm-hmm.
numerology when we're looking for coincidences and we're trying to piece puzzles together.
Mm-hmm.
So when he passed away, it was September 13th, but he was shot September 7th. If you add 9 plus 7, you get 16.
Mm.
Which is really
Wow.
interesting. And then you add 9 plus 13th on the day he passed away a few days later, you get 22, which is Uranus. And the 13 number represents the number of death. It represents Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
And then the entire day, when you add it straight across, you get 47. You get Scorpio and Venus, and you get 11 from the 7. And it's just so odd that how some of the numerology links to a lot of Scorpio energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I just feel like
Mm-hmm.
he spiritually chose to pass away on the 13th day. And supposedly, there's talks about a certain, P. Diddy putting a hit on him, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
and I feel there's no coincidences. I feel like it happened for a reason, and that's why he passed away on that 13th day of September.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like when I look at the chart and the aspects, one of the things that I definitely see is, again, there was a lot of that Sun Gemini aspect tied back in, but also a lot with the moon, again with the Pluto in opposition, and with the Pluto opposition with Saturn, and knowing that that Saturn energy related to that energy of Taurus and that energy of the wealth, and
Mhm.
his Pluto um really standing out with I believe they were both a Virgo in Pluto,
Mhm.
and that area of everything that he once grounded, again taken away, and having constructions of, because I feel like Taurus is such a dominant energy, just the Taurus zodiac and that area of having Taurus in your chart. And then when you have it aligned with the Pluto, again, just making everything that he worked for kind of just leave. And the moon conjunction with Pluto also feels like that spontaneous area of the Aries moon with something as dark and secretive and mystical and centered around closing a chapter, just happening without very much warning, but I feel like he sensed it in some way. And then another thing that stands out as well is the Jupiter squares Uranus.
Mhm.
And with his Jupiter in Scorpio and that area of Uranus being in Libra, which and ultimately is the energy of the seventh house of partnerships, and that
Mhm.
same energy coming back up of the partnerships with possibly this whole West Coast, East Coast like division, and
Mhm.
the relationships of that area of the rap battles and the area of Puffy, and that those two again. Um, there was a lot of speculation that possibly Suge Knight may have had something to do with Tupac's murder. I honestly don't feel that. I don't know. I don't know his chart, but I do feel like Tupac was Suge Knight's meal ticket.
Yeah.
He was the one where with Puffy, if you were to say that Puffy may have had something to do with Biggie's murder, I would probably say that's a high possibility, because I feel like somehow Biggie, even if he passed, Puffy was going to receive all of the royalties and all of the area of money. And then there's already been talks like that Biggie was thinking about leaving Bad Boy and starting his own record label. So
Mhm.
that is a possibility. And then also, Puffy had so many good artists at the time that in all honesty, he was like his own little empire where he was able to profit. But after, and Puffy continued to remain successful. But when Tupac passed away, Suge Knight just kind of, everything just went to shit for death row. So I don't think, honestly, he did anything. I mean, maybe, but I don't feel like there was that alignment. Even though it was possible that it could be an inside job because you have that area of it related to the seventh house. I feel like it was a relationship that was not necessarily because he died first, right?
Yeah, Tupac passed away before Biggie Smalls.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think that maybe Puffy or somebody may have had something to do with it.
Yeah, I felt it was beneficial for Puffy to have uh Tupac unalived, to be honest, from
Yeah.
me, like, oh, just looking at his chart real quick, for
Hmm.
the both of them to be unalived, you know? And when I was looking at Tupac's chart, he had a 9-degree Libra in Uranus, which could have created enemies from him having his talents, from his philosophical approach to life. His Mars and Chiron opposing the Uranus and Libra could point
Hmm.
out to enemies amongst friends, maybe a
Hmm.
setup conspired against him.
Right.
And Uranus is very sudden as well. And it kind of opposes that very like what is it, that methodical energy that Libra has,
Hmm.
where it like weighs out pros and cons, and it makes a list, and it's the house of business collaborations. And I I felt like there had to be something that had to do with money and wealth, and I feel it somehow links back to um P. Diddy. I've
Hmm.
like they recently reopened the investigation, and supposedly there might be a link to P. Diddy.
Yeah, that's
And
what I heard, but I haven't really looked into it.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of looked at his chart just a little bit. I don't know
Right.
too much of his chart, but from what I was looking at, I felt from looking at his Mars in Capricorn and his Mercury in Scorpio. Like Mercury in Scorpio is a good placement to be a detective and see
Mhm.
everything below the surface. But then Mars in Capricorn with an action oriented person, I would feel like they would be really obsessive about details and obsessive about their wealth and their legacy, to the point that it could be detrimental to people around them. Like it could be a little bit greedy.
Mhm.
Um, forgot what else I was looking at his chart. Like even his, I think the soul number of just one of his stage names is the Tower, like P. Diddy. If you
Mhm.
do the numerology for that, you get the Tower, you get that Mars energy as well. So I feel like he was manifesting that like sudden, violent energy. And
Mhm.
even now, we still hear about women that have had issues with him and have
Right.
faced him physically and have
And
like felt
some
like,
young men too.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where it's like unwarranted. And I feel like he has that type of
Right.
energy.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And hopefully time will tell, that
Yeah.
maybe there'll be some revelation or justice for was Biggie's was there ever an arrest for his murder?
To be honest, I don't recall.
I
I
don't
don't think there was,
I don't
and neither
yeah.
was there for Pac.
Right.
Um and supposedly there was, from what I was looking into, there was so much cover up. And
Mm-hmm.
they say that even P. Diddy possibly paid off the police in both cases.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like we'll never know, because I feel like even the people that were supposed to look into it were somehow paid off.
Yeah. So this is definitely a dynamic that I feel this energy of destiny or karma was definitely in some ways written out in the cosmos or in the stars or in the
Mhm.
alignments, as one might say. There's definitely some coincidences and some energy alignments between their two charts that we can't deny. The fact that they're both Sun and Gemini, um, you know, both basically have a lot of the same transits. Majority of it is different, but there is some energy that makes you really think. One of the aspects that I picked up on that I thought was something that I wanted to talk about, and you'll appreciate this too, because we have in Biggie's chart, we have, when we correlate the two charts together, that Tupac's Chiron is in Biggie's first house. And even though we don't know Tupac's house placements, we do know that his Chiron would lead up to the first house at 13 degrees.
Mhm. And 13 is the number of
Or-
death.
yeah. And the first house, the energy of life.
Mhm.
Definitely some energy that is an area that two definitely strong personalities, ego and self-image. It makes me wonder, like, what would they have been if they didn't have this beef? Because I really think like this fighting was also really emphasized by the two external sources, including Puffy and Suge Knight. Like, I mean, if maybe Biggie was signed with Tupac's label, would they still be here?
Yeah, I honestly think so. I feel like between their management, there was some sort of meddling, and maybe I would say like they played telephone with each other, kind of like 4-year-olds do, and they pass the message on, and it becomes diluted and you don't hear the message clearly as it was spoken the first time around. So it's like I kind of feel like they were meddling in their business when they shouldn't have, and they
Mhm.
were playing that he said she said game, and
Right.
I feel like that's what led to it. And I feel the person that was mostly instigating it, the whole like East Coast West Coast thing, was Diddy, because he was the one managing um Biggie at the time. What he should have done is not allowed him to release that song
Mhm.
and waited it out until everything, like, settled.
Mhm.
You um I would love to go over in the future P. Diddy's chart to see what is it about him that likes to light a fire and cause chaos,
Right.
with his
Right.
management skills.
Definitely. That would be a good chart. Those would be a good chart to go over. Also, Tupac's moon in Aries is also in Biggie's first house as well, aligned with conjunction of the Chiron.
Mhm.
So the moon, the emotional states, is basically weighing on Biggie's life, identity, who he is. And what's interesting is I feel like, because I feel like even though Biggie seemed very more softer, that Tupac was way more emotional and explosive,
Definitely.
emotionally explosive. I guess you could say emotionally explosive.
Definitely.
Also, one of the aspects is, again, we have Tupac's Uranus in Biggie's seventh house of Libra at 9 degrees. And that's the area of relationships again, and that area of being the rebel and also having that area of unconventional thinking and ability to visualize all possibilities, basically shining over his area of partnerships.
Definitely. I think that's why he was also so suave with women, having that Uranus and Libra, and so
Mhm.
flighty as well. Like he wasn't really 100% committed to one person at a time, you know? He had numerous flings and affairs, and I was
Mhm.
surprised to even find out that he dated Madonna at one point,
Who,
you know?
Tupac?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's
they
right.
were pen pals while he was locked up at
Right.
one point. Yeah.
Right. And this, because I feel like a lot of Biggie's area was resembled in that space um of the third house, even though it was in his Cancer. But with Tupac, he had um Tupac's Saturn in his third house of Biggie, the area of home. And they had a lot of oppositions in their alignment of the two charts together. So the moon, Tupac's moon in strong opposition with Biggie's Pluto. Mercury opposition, Tupac's Mercury in strong opposition with Biggie's midheaven. Venus opposition in Biggie's Neptune, the area of relationships, love, and dreams,
Mhm.
opposing each other. So definitely a war of who will be the most loved. Uh, Jupiter's opposition, Tupac's Jupiter in strong opposition with Biggie's Sun. So I'm not surprised that they had so many challenges between each other. Definitely with Tupac's Chiron in strong opposition of Biggie's Uranus. And the thing that stands out with me is I definitely think like both of these two individuals changed um, a lot of how like we see the quote unquote like rap beef, or like, because we're like, wow, these two individuals basically died over this.
Definitely. And I mean, we still have beefs that
Yeah.
happen, even after they have passed away, but this was something that was just like highlighted all over the media. It was like one of the first out and open beefs. Like a lot of the beefs that happen now in within rap artists, it's like very below the radar, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess since we have come to an end of the podcast and we have been here a long time,
Yes.
uh, so I want to thank you so much for being on Chakras and Cuss Words. I would definitely say, if I was to think of anything as like last thoughts related to these two, I do think that there was some type of like destiny that brought these two alliances that once were and then turned them into like enemies. And I do think that this taught maybe like the collective a lesson that, like this isn't worth it, and also the power of like sound energy and the area of engulfing yourself in certain elements and environments can really shape who you are and what happens to you in your life and also who you surround yourselves with, right? Like that area of who your friends are, who are you with, I do think that probably if two of them, if they both some way maybe saw it was getting too much and maybe broke ties from the media or broke ties from record labels or broke ties from being out there, maybe they would have been able to still be here with us today. But I think both of them were very remarkable souls and spirits that gave a lot to the collective with their voices and with their philosophy and wisdom.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rose, for being on. Please let everybody know where to find you.
So I'm on Etsy as Cora del Sol by Rose. I'm also on TikTok and I also have a YouTube and I upload random readings on YouTube as well. And I'm on there as Cora del Sol Tarot. And I'm also starting a blog soon. And I just barely did a blog on the last chat we did. So I'm definitely going to brush over what we discussed and type up a short summary of what we discussed numerology wise tied to the astrology.
Nice. Thank you. And make sure to share your links with me and I will put them in the show notes. I just want to thank everybody for listening to the Biggie and Tupac Astrology and Numerology podcast and also for listening to Chakras and Cuss Words. Please comment, like, and of course, subscribe and share with a friend who may be interested in this story. Everybody have an amazing day. Bye.
Bye.